Podcasts Radio Network proudly presents the Broadcasters Podcast, where we dive deep into the media industry headlines and dissect the digital disruption that diverges the masses into the new media counterculture and away from the media establishment. Here is the king of podcasts.
We're going to talk about music and music radio here on the Broadcasters Podcast, episode 218. Thanks for being with me, King of Podcasts, here with you. I listen to Billboard Breakdown. So if you look for Spectrum Pulse on YouTube, Mark Ron is the guy that hosts the Billboard Breakdown show. I really enjoy listening to that show and watching it because of the chart action that goes on the Billboard Hot 100, and he covers it pretty extensively. Constantly talking about the load of new songs that he's very critical on or praising, and then of course the gains, the losses, and who's in the top 10. And when I look at the top 10 right now of music, and compared to last year, when we had several artists that were making their way up to the top, I still remember the excitement where Olivia Rodrigo all of a sudden broke away with Driver's License. Well, the breakaway this year is the Encanto soundtrack. Songs like We Don't Talk About Bruno, Surface Pressure, The Family Madrigal, Dos Orgullitas, all that kind of stuff, right? That's the album that's making their way up. And by the way, it's just streaming only. Overwhelming streaming. Meanwhile, the Billboard Hot 100 algorithm made some changes last year. They never get publicized. Let's make that point across too. But when you look at what they're doing now and the change of the algorithm, where for whatever reason, the music now continues to be such a point. The algorithm right now is something wrong there, because you can see that its change is happening because radio, for whatever reason, is at such a top spots. And so we look at what's going on, and then, I look at the changes where radio songs are now much more prominent on the chart. And I'm wondering if Billboard and MRC has something to do with this, where there's just some significant changes made. Because right now, it's happening too much. Really, I'm surprised at what we're having, and where it's just something's wrong here. And I'm not happy about the changes that have happened. And I look at some places where they talk about, well, here's what the charts look like and the changes that are coming up. And I say to myself, and there's really not much information on it, which I'm surprised no one ever talks about, because you would think all these different artists want to be out there. They want to see what's actually happening here. And they don't know what there is to go look at. Like when they go looking at what the charts look like, there was a time where people can actually do predictions and they can see what songs are doing well and which ones are not. So we're looking at now from Talk of the Charts on Twitter. They do their predictions regularly of what songs are going to be the most popular songs for the following week, or that week, whatever it might be. They'll do that kind of thing. And I can appreciate them doing that, where they give us a lot of information from it. And I can look at this and I can say to myself, man, you look at the streaming and you look at the radio play and how radio is now consuming almost all of the algorithm. Like, you now know that the scoring of the Billboard Hot 100 charts are now consumed more with radio. And no one's talking about this, but that's what's happened. It wasn't like this before. But if I look at the top 10 songs right now, I'm looking at it. So Heat Waves and Glass Animals right now is the number one song in the country for 2 weeks in a row. 60 weeks on the chart. Meanwhile, the other songs that are on the chart as well, there was a time where streaming, you'd have a song that would just instantly just shoot right up. And when it did, then sometimes you'd have a song that would just go right up to number one and then just drop. Like, that's where the BTS manipulation happened a couple of years ago. We talked about that on the program. Now I look, and you look at the songs they have here, based on their point system. And Talk of the Charts, however they do this, they do a really good job of putting the scoring on here of how it works. for whatever reason, Heat Waves and Glass Animals has, among streaming, the third most streams of any song in this chart right now. Well, Surface Pressure is at number 21. It has 16 million streams. Okay. But then in the top 25, that's where we're at. Now, Heat Waves has 66.4 million streams or million plays on radio. So radio can just manipulate that all they want. They can go ahead and boost the song all they want. It's a song that has been on the chart for well over 2 years. And they can just go ahead and say, oh, you know what? We're just going to put this up here and we're going to just put it right up to the top. That's it. We don't talk about Bruno. That's 11 weeks on the chart. It is very light on streaming. It was actually number one song for what, like 5 weeks? And the song right now, even at number 2, 9.3 million plays in radio and 25 million streams. And so why would radio not play this? Well, it just doesn't fit. It's a kid song. That's what they feel like. But the Encanto song, if you play it any other place or worse in the country, doesn't mean any other country in the world, especially in Europe. In the UK, the song was 7 weeks at number 1. 7 weeks. And you know what? Sure, there was some, dissension and some little bit of, frustration as to why this song came up and all these Encanto songs kept being so popular. Well, that's true. But then if it's a song that everybody's listening to on Spotify, which has so many listeners, okay, I'm trying to think of how many different listeners do you have that are Spotify listeners in the U.S. And I'm trying to say to myself, the amount of listeners they have in America, it's 41.5 million this year, 2022. Meanwhile, radio listeners, if I went ahead and look at that, they're going to say it's, they say 83% of all Americans listen to terrestrial radio in a given week. So they can't even give you the number. If I look at Google, they'll say it's 272 million listeners. But of course, that's 12 years and older. But that's not the regular setup. Okay, because when you look at what's going on here, it's not a younger audience that's listening. Remember, when I look at the age demographics for radio, I mean, it's not good. There's a lot of people that are not listening well, and they're all kind of coming down a lot. Now, sure, some of you out there are going to be asking, the King of Podcasts, why do you care about this so much? I like the fact of having new music on the charts. There's something to me where, at the moment, I've been putting together music playlists, and of course, there's a lot of great music out there. I mean, right now, I have a playlist right now for Spotify that is all older music. So from like the start of rock and roll to, let's say, the mid 80s, right? I have all that there, and I do that, and it's good, and I enjoy it. And I look and I'm saying, okay, so when I look at what's going on here, and I'm saying to myself, okay, what I know is that I can listen to a lot of older music, and I can appreciate it and enjoy it, but I can't just listen to older music all the time. Like, there's a whole point where I want to be able to enjoy new music that's coming out. Like, I mean, I can't just sit back and just hear one thing and that's it, and that's all we're going to listen to. There has to be something more. And I'm not hearing that now. So I can go ahead and chug along and listen to about 1,000 songs I have in this timeless hits playlist here on Spotify, and like it, and listen to it, and it's good. And I have another playlist that's everything from like the mid 80s to now, and that's like, I have that one, and that kind of sets up with trying to think. I have almost about 1,000 songs there too, and over 24 hours worth of music. Actually, almost 60 hours worth of music on each playlist. Meanwhile, the amount of new music that's out there, there's a lot on Spotify. There's a lot on Pandora and Apple and Stem Player and all this stuff. So there's music to listen to. And in that new music section I have there on my playlist, it's 139 songs or 6.5 hours. And I'll look and there's new music coming out this week on Friday. And there's some good stuff out there. But why it gets continuously dropped down or then it gets stifled for a long time. And no wonder record labels can't really do much with what's going on with radio and other places because they're not promoting as such. I mean, remember, one of the things that's happening now is that the record labels, they decided last year or 2 years ago to get rid of their promotional divisions for radio. They were focusing more on streaming. But then what's happening is that the established places like a Billboard, their charts mean something. And, you know, they might have a section for social media charts about what songs are viral, and they'll put that out. But the Hot 100, which is the one that everybody follows, the entire industry follows, radio and music, they're not getting anything else. Like, there's just, it's flat. The songs they have on there, it's sad. 60 weeks for Glass Animals. You look at Super Gremlin and Kodak Black, that's 18 weeks on the chart at number 3. 16 weeks for Gale and ABCDFU, which the song was blowing up streaming for a number of weeks. But because of how radio did not want to be a part of it right away, because it was a new artist, it was untested, the program director was going to say, oh, no, we can't try these guys, we can't try this girl out yet. Even though she was probably in there and was with a big label. And they said, oh, okay, no, we're not going to do with this right now. Okay. They don't bother. And then they leave it alone. Why is it that Stay, Kid Laroi, and Justin Bieber, why is that song on there so long? That song has not left the Hot 100 in a long time. Now, it did go off the Hot 100 as of late, but the predictions say that song's coming back up. Well, this is the most recent chart. It got back up to the number 5. And the points come from radio. Radio has a song that is more than 6 months old, and it's still one of the most played songs on the radio. And radio's not even afraid to go and say they're doing that. So Gale and ABCDFU finally got up to about 60 million streams, which is great, but it took a long time to get there. And as I said, if you've ever listened to this show for any particular amount of time, I talk about with a new artist, it might take about 12 weeks for them to get up to where they should be on the charts. When it's not a new artist. An established artist, absolutely. Justin Bieber on a song, they put it up there. Why it took Glass Animals 60 weeks to get here? Well, part of it was streaming because of the appeal from the Netflix show. I forget which one. And all of a sudden, here we are. Justin Bieber also on here with Ghost at number 7. 61.8 million plays on radio. 8.9 million streams. At number 20, and was up there 24 weeks on the chart. Established artists get carte blanche. They get the red carpet treatment right up to the top 10. Ed Sheeran has 2 songs in the top 10. One that's 37 weeks old. One that's 26 weeks old. Meanwhile, every other chart in the world, Bad Habits and Shivers are not on the top. They're not. I mean, if we looked at Billboard's global chart, for instance, and we try to look at that and show where they are looking at what other songs are going out there and what's happening, okay, you can look at the global charts now. And you can say to yourself, okay, in that chart, you can see, they'll say that Glass Animals is number 1, ABCDFU is number 2, Enemy, Imagine Dragons is 3. And by the way, if you look for Imagine Dragons on this list, and you look for it, I mean, I'm looking and I don't see it on the list, do you? Imagine Dragons is an established artist. And the music came from a video game, but for whatever reason, the song is not on this list. Not on the Hot 100 at all. And so the Billboard Hot 100 is consumed by radio songs. And only particular stars get to be up near the top, and that's it. The Global 200 shows, and sure, Justin Bieber, Dua Lipa, Elton John, we'll talk about Bruno, Mommy is a song from Becky G and Karol G, reggaeton song that made it up to number 7. Meanwhile, on the Billboard Hot 100, it got up to 26. But let me tell you, like that song, 4 weeks in, and it's working its way up. But that's like reggaeton, there's such an amazing appeal. And there's quite a few Spanish stations that'll play, but like it's the streaming that's bringing that song up to where it is. And if I look on the chart there, I don't know if it shows or not. Mommy's 26, according to what they have here. Well, that's on this list as well. And if I look at it and I say, okay, that song, 11 million streams. But they also have sales, like crazy sales. The other thing, too, is that used to have the charts. The sales used to matter about who used to listen to the songs. They never talk about the songs and the listing of what their sales are. So let's look at that part. Okay. We don't talk about Bruno. 5,400 sales. Heat Waves 3,200. Meanwhile, some of the established artists stay 1.4K. Look at that. Ghost 5,000 sales. And then Lil Nas X has his song, That's What I Want, and that's in there, and it's under 3,000 sales. Like, if you looked at the sales and you tried to add that up, that used to be the original when SoundScan was out there, or when you just did record store reports. If you just did the sales on the chart, then you say to yourself, okay, Cold Heart is still there, 7,000 sales. If you look at some of the other songs they have in the top 25, or just the top 50, we'll just use that for an example. Top 50, you have a lot of songs that are getting really big, a lot of sales. Double AA by Walker Hayes, right? You look at into the top 50. And you say, okay, Santa My Boots, Morgan Wallen, 2,800 in sales. Sure, the sales are not that big a deal, but it's actual money coming in. And people are really putting their money down to go and listen to the music. This is what I don't understand either. Why does radio get such a play when money used to determine that the people's dollar, when they want to invest in an artist and they're buying music, for instance, BTS, how do you judge them for the fact that they had so much money being spent on their music, and why that doesn't have more credibility to it? Why doesn't that happen? By Dirt, Jordan Davis, Luke Bryan, 2,700 records sold for them. Digital sales, but still, it's important. And I look at this and I say to myself, till you can't Cody Johnson. Like, sure, if you're going to count sales, then country songs might be up on the chart very high. So the Hot 100 could say, hey, listen, country, they got a lot of songs that get sold. People are into buying digital songs a lot. For instance, Bam Bam, Camila Cabello and Ed Sheeran, 8,000 sales. 8,000 copies sold. But yet that song's 25, and the radio's not behind it, 13.9 million and 9 million streams. So with that, they get a new spot, but it's only sales that brings them up. And sales used to matter. So when you can't keep up with the algorithm and what the record companies need to do to get the music up, then they're not going to care at all about the streaming. They're only going to care about the streaming and not the radio. So why is it that, if radio wanted to make some money, why aren't they getting some kind of commission on the sales to push the music out there? Why don't they get that? Based on impressions. Radio should be getting money for that so they can support themselves, and then they would be encouraged to do more because they're not making money on the ads. But radio doesn't want to think about that. They're not thinking about that at all. They're not even trying to worry about that. They'd rather just go ahead and do what they're doing. As we look at the songs that are out there, weekly top songs, if you look at the Spotify chart, they make mention of a number of things that are on the global charts. And if I look at the songs that are on top, okay, streaming says one thing. Heat Waves, Glass Animals number 1, Stay number 2, Enemy number 3, ABCDFU, Gale 4, Cold Heart 5, Mommy 6. Interest You Baby 7, Desesperados 8, Easy on Me 9, Shivers 10. But then they have some songs on here on the bottom of that top 10 that are making a lot of traction, but yet Billboard Hot 100, not even close. Like, if I go and compare to that, okay, Boyfriend by Dove Cameron. Now, she's established Disney star, Descendants Fame and other movies, but she's put this song out. It's making some traction. It's now number 11 outside top 10, 16 million streams. But if you look at the charts themselves and you say, okay, the song is not even in a top 25. Song's 42. And according to their list here, 8.7 million streams accounted for streaming. It did go up 13 places. It was 55, now 42. And then I look at, okay, $2,000, 2,000 copies in streams, 5.1 million rotations in radio. So, you know, it's like the people are spending money mostly on subscriptions for Spotify, right? And they're taking the ad support and all that stuff. So like, they're going through all that. And yet this song is outside the top 10, but when it comes to Billboard, not even noticed. And radio, not even paying attention. And it's been up there for a little bit. I mean, the song has been up there for 4 weeks, but what is it going to take? Another 8 weeks before it gets up to the top, and that's how they're going to go? Is that how it's supposed to be? Are we going to just keep doing that over and over? But radio chooses to do this. And listen, I know I've done this over and over with charts, and I'll go through and I'll look at it, and once in a while I will do something like this right here, go through the charts, the conundrum of like, why is it that streaming is not respected, and where things are with that. And I'm telling you, what needs to happen is, you know, we talked last week about AMP from Amazon. When live radio becomes something where radio no longer controls it, they're going to lose the stranglehold they have. Now, they can go ahead and use the old stats that they always use. Like right now, Deloitte, the PR firm, they actually make mention of that radio is listened to by more than 3 billion people around the world. And I don't know who wrote this, but this is social.com. I made a mention of like, okay, they say, if you feel like the radio is dead and you're the only one who still listens to it, think again. Radio is actually alive and doing well. It's a popular medium because it is accessible and versatile. It's a free technology that allows listeners to hear their favorite music or shows without cost. Blah, 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 blah. Now, the typical radio listener spends about 1 hour, 39 minutes per day listening to the radio. But they're not saying anything about the demographics. They're not talking about the younger audience or how old the audience is. They say 92% of adults each week listen to radio. And it continues to reach more than any other platform. But how would you know that without you actually hearing people listen to the radio, or where you have a way to listen to catch a device that's playing it? Let's say if it's in your car or on your phone, listen to TuneIn or iHeartRadio or Odyssey or one of their apps. Like, they can find their stats. Radio garners more listening time from U.S. adults than any other source. And so, music streaming services clock in at 18%, and even more than podcasts, which it says it's 6% of time. According to this study, and this is from nationalpublicmedia.com, they say that radio gets 41% share of listening time. Streaming is 18%. Own Music 10%. YouTube Music 9%. SiriusXM 9%. Podcast 6%. TV music channels 4%. I don't know where they're getting this from. Like, they don't tell you where the stats come from and how they get to this point. And they say that radio is the medium of choice for 94% of people aged 35 to 49. And they say that number of radio listeners has grown by 116% in the last 7 years. And they say whether it's the recent events with the pandemic or something else, people aged 13 to 34 have started to pay attention to radio programs more. Okay, well, that's programs. It's not music. They're not coming for music. And National Public Media, I don't know whether they're really getting much for what they're doing, but this is what they're thought. They also said that by 2025, this is Deloitte again, that 18 to 34-year-olds will most likely spend more time listening to radio than watching TV. This is a total fabrication. This particular study, all these stats. They say that despite all predictions, younger generations continue to trust the spoken media. Yeah, radio through podcasting. It's not through radio. They're not listening to AM and FM, but they don't distinguish that either, because they might be counting podcasting itself or these radio companies running their own on-demand content. They say it might be only a temporary trend, but the fact is TV viewing among the previously mentioned demographic is declining 3 times faster than it is with radio. But are they talking about television where you're watching on a TV? Or are you watching programming that's on YouTube or TikTok, which is viewing something on a screen? It might not be a television screen, an actual television, but still that is watching content. That's watching. But they're saying television. They're just specifically saying that. They mentioned that boomers spend more time listening to the radio than any other generation, ages 50 to 64. And they said there were 121.5 million radio listeners weekly as of September 2021. Meanwhile, there are stations that are still making money. The most being WTOP in Washington, D.C., $69 million a year. And broadcasters reached $20 billion in revenue in 2020. And it's expected to grow to $23.4 billion in 2022. This is from ibisworld.com. And then radio ad spending reached $10 billion in 2020. So, you know, some of this has to be considered. They're also talking about the world. And maybe there's in the world and other countries, music will still be standard and will still be important when they're doing that. But it really isn't much. Okay? What they're doing doesn't make much of a difference. It's not significant. But they think it's they think that, I mean, I'm not going to be blind to the fact that they think that, some of these major firms, they're able to go ahead and fudge the numbers all they want to make it look like, oh, yeah, people will still listen to the radio. But they're not. There's a story that came out that kind of debunks this idea. I want to talk about that. They said that do fewer radios in the home present a problem for broadcasters? So they don't talk about this part, but we're going to bring it up here on the program right now. Radio TV Business Report, they report this. Edison Research did their Infinite Dial 2022, and they're about to release some findings. They report that in the 2020 Infinite Dial report, that just under 1 in 3 Americans aged 12 and older do not have a single radio in their home. Yeah, we don't talk about the fact that people do not actually have a radio. Just a box, a device that tunes in AM, FM radio, or a console where it plays AM, FM radio. You know what? I have one. Like there's one. I have one that's a boombox that I have somewhere in the house, and I haven't used it in a long time. So I have a radio here. I never turn it out and play it. When I think about radio, I mean, we have a home entertainment system that was an audio system that's really nice. I never use it. I haven't used it in 20 years. More than that. And I'm saying to myself, okay, so we have that. And then we're saying, okay, so nobody's listening to music on an actual radio where people are taking it with them. That's gone. And so when they talk about how people are listening to radio, how are they able to go and determine that people listen to radio on radios? Because radio is not even listened to on a radio. If you have a radio, it is in your car. We're not seeing a lot of people buying Walkmans because I don't think those are out there anymore. Or people buying AM, FM radios. Like, I don't see that a lot out there. If you want to buy a shortwave radio, if you want to buy a radio that might be for weather, that will allow you to listen to stations out there, sure, those are out there. But that's just for emergencies. But it's not an everyday use. Because when we think now, if you want to listen to radio, yeah, it's on your phone. It's on apps. You can listen through an app to a station. You can listen to a company app, a corporate app like an Odyssey or an iHeartRadio, and find the stations there. BBC Radio with a great app too, right? BBC Sounds. They have music on there, but that's where you listen to radio there on your phone. But they're talking about the fact that people don't have that many radios out there. And how many people do you know are actually going to these apps and listen to radio on the phone? Even with Sirius XM. I mean, you have to go ahead and have a device, or you have to be able to go and stream it somewhere if you're Bluetoothing it. I don't know if you are. But we're not getting a good answer about that. Nothing is being really described or explained. And so I want that also to be talked about here, but they're not. More in the study that's going to talk about. They show the study of the number of radios in a U.S. household. And for one, they're showing that in 2008, 0 radios in a household, that went up, that they made up for 4% of the total U.S. population 12 years and up. 1 to 3 in a house made up 64%. 4 more, 32%. Now you go all the way now to 2022. 2022, 0 radios in a household is now 39%. 1 to 3 radios, 54%. And 4 or more, 7%. That's where we are now. 14 years ago, 4% of respondents said they had no radios at home. Also, 57% of respondents aged 12 to 34 reported having no radios at home. So how are you saying that we got 100 and, what is it, 120, or what was it? What was they said the number was? 170 million listeners of radio? How do you get that when you don't have that many people with radios? Like, how are you quantifying that research right there? Nobody's saying anything. The findings are a preview of the March 23rd release of the Infinite Dial podcast movement, evolutions, and through a live webcast. Larry Rawson, the Edison Research president, says that, quote, of course, nearly all cars have AM/FM radios available. People can listen to the content of radio stations on their phones or smart speakers. However, the elimination of the standard single-use radio from so many households makes the challenge that much harder in the location that most people spend the most hours. And most radio companies believe the smart speaker brings the radio back into the home. Well, they could. And they're going to have more information on smart speakers in that presentation. We'll catch that once the podcast Movement Evolutions comes out and we can learn more about it. So there's no real answer for that. But what I realize is the way they used to go ahead and calculate who was listening to the radio is antiquated. It's not the same anymore. When you look at that, you're saying to yourself, hold on a second. It doesn't make sense. You can't add all that up. Meanwhile, we know there are a lot of people that are listening to streaming on various devices. I, for one, at my age, I didn't know I would go and decide to go ahead and just completely eliminate radio, but I do. Because radio doesn't give me the quality of music that I get from streaming. Radio gives you a limited list of only the most popular songs, and also they are only playing songs and they're not offering anything else for me to listen to. Plus, some of the songs I might listen to might have certain language or certain content to it, or some people might want to hear a song that has an album cut, and they don't get to hear that. But on Spotify, they can. But they're not saying anything about that. They don't have any consideration of that. Therefore, you look at all this and you say to yourself, radio doesn't do justice for music. And radio's not serving the music labels at all. They're not doing anything because they don't feel like they're getting any money off of them. All right? When you look at radio itself, I guess kind of odd, okay? I'm looking at the fact that in their charts, okay, this is the media base. This is where iHeartRadio and other companies within, theirs is their chart, or top 40 coming up. Little Nas X, That's What I Want. That's number 1 among media-based charting stations. Gale ABCDFU is 2. Last week was number 1. So among radio stations, that was considered number 1. You look on the list, we continue on. Glass Animals is Heatwave's number 3. But remember, They had 60 weeks to get that song up there, but it's only now at the top and being played everywhere as we speak. But it took forever for radio to get behind a song like this. And you say to yourself, well, we've heard this song for 2 years. Like, why are we now getting to this as we speak? Doja Cat is on there twice because now she is the new darling in the radio, so it's good for her. Woman and Need to You Know are number 4 and number 6 respectively. Kid Laroi, Justin Bieber stay 7, but it's also been up there as high as number 1. Lotto and Big Energy, they put that song, you know why? It's not because of the artist, because the artist never gets that much play. It's because he has the Tom Tom Club or the Tom Tom Club Genius of Love sample. And they think, oh, well, people listen to the song because of that. And so they gave that song a chance just because of that old, familiar sample. Or Mariah Carey Fantasy. Mariah Carey Fantasy, they might think of that song. And they hear that clip and they say, oh, they'll listen to the melodic sample underneath the rap of Lotto. They'll do that. Most blown of the weekend because they're both established artists. Number 9 with One right now, which, by the way, that song's not even on the chart in the Billboard Hot 100, I believe. They're not even on the chart. Or in the chart. And that's what they do. So, like, Imagine Dragons' Enemy is 10. But there's such a disconnect on all of it. And there was a time where music and radio were together. The Billboard Hot 100 mattered, the sales mattered, and music worked with radio in perfect harmony to build each other and to make money. But for whatever reason, music and radio don't want to work together and make money. They continue to fight with each other. And that's the biggest problem here. They need to get this figured out because everything's fighting over money and royalties. But yet, while they're doing that for their older artists, they are missing out on what the future is for music. And if they don't get their shit together, then people are not going to go to the record labels to catch the music. They're going to go ahead and go to TikTok for it because that's what's going on. Now, TikTok as a radio station is not going to happen yet, but we talked about it last week that TikTok now has their own radio service. Like they're actually doing a thing where they're going to have a setup for them where they're going to offer 10-minute videos. And when they do that, that means you're going to see music videos up there. That's going up against YouTube. And some people, that might just be enough for them to listen to radio there. And that can be done too. Sure. And so they're all going to take this and they're going to say, oh, you know what? TikTok's going to do their own thing. And they have so many other things they're working on, but they don't understand that, you know, TikTok inadvertently has become a major disruptor in the last 2 years. We see artists that are making their way into the charts for the fact that TikTok created a viral campaign inadvertently because of the dancing or being used in whatever there is to build songs and get them up there. And new artists are getting noticed, or certain established artists are getting noticed to see that as well. And nobody's thinking about that. Nobody's considering about what the ramifications are going to be. It's the constant thing that goes on I always talk about where it's this counterculture that is so interesting. So much music's being discovered. Like there was a time where we really enjoyed discovering new music and new artists. And also thinking about what kind of music's out there that we're not listening to and people don't get to hear because of what's going on. Well, nothing's being answered. Radio's not helping themselves at all. They're going to keep living in the delusion and then denial that they're losing audience as fast as they're dropping talent and losing money on a regular basis and growing in debt in complete denial. And as long as these companies for radio are still propped up with debt, they're going to continue to do that. As long as these private equity companies hold on to them, they're going to continue to do that. But they're not making any kind of revenue that's going to withstand for a long time. And their audience continues to get older and their audience continues to leave. See, the thing is, radio is attached to music, to the record labels. I mean, radio's still working alongside. They have the component of having the talent to ask questions of the musicians, and they're going to the concert, or they're just on a Zoom call, whatever it is. They can have interviews being done with all these stars that go viral, but really they do. And then get the music out there for said artists. Promotions lead to sales. But the record labels don't care about promoting a record. They'll have an artist promote a tour. So that means that the tour promoters are caring about that, not the music labels, not the record labels. Because they're not making any money off of the tours. And that's also because of the priority why the artists care more about their merch and their tours than they do the music they're putting out. Listen, they need to get the music out there somewhere. And if they got to go through streaming, they could just submit it and that's it. Not even go through the middleman of the record label, who really don't do much to properly promote a said artist. So they don't care. They really just do what they're going to do. Meanwhile, radio has their own problem with music because of royalties. And this not only affects established artists, but it will also deal with future artists. And here's what we got to talk about. If royalties became an issue and radio was forced to pay a significant performance fee for on-air music, if that was made. Now, radio obviously has a big lobbying effort, National Association of Broadcasters, making their point. Let's talk about the story that came in from Inside Radio about the music industry no longer seeing radio royalty settlement coming outside of Congress. Now, I mentioned this story, but I want to go back to it again. Here's what I talked about last week. I want to go through the whole story and explain this. So hopes are fading that a negotiating table is where the long-running battle between radio and the music industry over a performance fee for on-air music use will be settled, after the National Association of Broadcasters president Curtis Legate said that his offer to the record labels to restart talks so far has gone unanswered. Music industry reps say they no longer believe private deal-making is the best route to take. So they don't want to do working in private. They want the government to intervene, which is sad, because there should be some negotiating being done. But radio doesn't want to do anything. They don't want to do anything to negotiate a fee. They'd rather not have to pay at all. They feel like there's an entitlement that the music comes out, they get service with the music, and they play it. Meanwhile, the musicians don't get anything for it. Music First Chairman Joe Crowley made a comment about this and said this. Quote, "We understand completely Mr. Legate's desire for broadcasters to have a voice in the process. We have no qualms with that at all. In fact, we welcome him to join us at the table. But make no mistake, actual legislation is the only vehicle through which a workable, enforceable compromise can be achieved here. Now, it's been nearly 2 years since the National Association of Broadcasters, the NAB, and music industry representatives met one-on-one in the urging of congressional leaders who had pushed the two industries together in hopes that a private settlement could be reached without the need for lawmakers to intervene. Terms from the NAB have not been made public, but the trade group said they broadly cover a variety of music uses, including both on-air and streaming. Legate and his predecessor, Gordon Smith, the former NAB president, said after preliminary discussions, the music industry reps refused to attend any additional meetings. They don't want to go ahead and meet at the table to hear the offer from the NAB on behalf of radio. Crowley went on to say, as we said from the beginning, quote, the radio loophole is fundamentally a problem of bad and outdated law. And the only way to fix a bad and outdated law is to pass a new and better one. That's what we've been striving to do with the American Music Fairness Act, H.R. 4130. Now, this Music Fairness Act would create a performance right on AM/FM airplay. Rates will be set for most stations by the Copyright Royalty Board. The target is larger radio groups, so that's iHeartRadio, Odyssey, Cox Media, Town Square, all those, right? Those are being considered here. They would have to pay $1.5 million annual revenue, and whose parent companies make less than $10 million in annual revenue, $500 per year in performance royalties. Smaller stations with less than $100,000 less a year in revenue would pay $10 a year. So what we're saying right now is the big corporations of radio that are being defended by the NAB, which is a big lobbying firm, state organization themselves. And that $1.5 million in annual revenue would take a big chunk out of their bottom line, even for them. And that's an issue they don't want to have. They don't want to deal with that. Now, if I'm right, they're saying stations. This is not companies. Each station would be responsible for $1.5 million in royalties. And like I said, only the highest revenue stations are like an WTOP is like $70 million, but that's a talk station. And that particular story I told about before, that's not even talking about music radio. Well, let's say Kiss FM. Let's say they make $25-30 million. And of course, they have to make money off their ads. That cost right there of $1.5 million in revenue, it's too much for them. They don't want to pay it. Like, I mean, they're not rolling in money. For them, they feel like it's a lot of money because all those stations, like for instance, let's say if it's iHeartRadio, they have what, 800 stations? So that means they have to pay like what, $1 billion in annual revenue? They don't even have that kind of money. Let's say Odyssey. Let's say they get like 300 stations, almost $500 million. They don't have that kind of money. Which is why radio companies should not be run the way they are with these big corporations that can't run properly. And the music companies, they're not making any money off their records because they used to make money on the royalties. And when sales went away because they made the mistake of not following the digital disruption of of music coming in through Napster, then going into Pandora, and Spotify, and Apple, and all that, they never considered that. By the way, I don't see anything where satellite radio is considered in this as well. But what happens with them? They're going to have to pay royalties as well. What if those stations had to follow the same thing, where SiriusXM had to spend $1.5 million? Oh, no, that's sorry. Yeah, the larger stations, that's what it was. Okay. They had to make under a $1.5 million. But they said that it would be the Copyright Royalty Board. Oh, okay. I got that confused. So, all right. Still, like, what kind of money are they going to ask for these stations to pay? I don't know. But it's a lot of money they don't have. Millions of dollars are going to be asked for in royalties. That is, properly asked for. Now, we talked about how there were changes where there was the support from lawmakers. We brought that up. I'm going to skip that. And just say that, look, Legate thinks that if the royalty bill fails, it is likely to return with new sponsors in the future. And Legate also make mention of that, quote, we will look forward to working in good faith with broadcasters and members of Congress from both parties to pass new laws that will finally treat artists with the respect and the dignity they deserve, while also protecting the truly local radio stations that our communities count on. Yeah, whatever. They're just saying something to kind of just play nice and play fair and whatever. But there's still no excuse to the fact that, the Music Modernization Act was out there. We talked about the Music Modernization Act and the AM/FM Act, right? Music Modernization would take care of the royalties for artists, what was it, pre-1972? So the older artists finally were going to continue to get royalties for streaming, which is important. I mean, they also need to get paid. But the new artists, nothing's been put in here for that. And because of that, there's no money being made in new music. And yeah, you can also say a lot of artists can go and make new music with their own equipment, their own studios. They don't even need to get, book recording time. They have a pretty easy way to go and make recordings themselves on the cheap. And they can put it out there streaming or whatever it might work. And then you're saying to yourself, oh, the record labels, what are you good for? I mean, you're good at giving out contracts to an artist to do record deals. But then it's the promotion of certain artists to get out somewhere. And how good are they doing representing the artists? And the level of representation that they're making. There's a lot of new music out there. There's not even a question of that. But it doesn't get played. It doesn't get any mainstream exposure at all. None. And I don't know why. But there's no good answer for it. No one's saying anything about it. And this is what I have as an issue that I don't like what's going on. So there's a couple other stories I want to bring up before I wrap things up. Daylight savings time is proposed now to threaten to cut morning drive for radio. So this is an interesting story that caught me because of the fact that, if you haven't heard, there's a proposal for daylight savings time to become permanent. So as daylight savings has changed right now, where we sprung forward, and I'm recording this show tonight at 1:21 in the morning on a Thursday or on a Friday morning. I'm saying to myself, okay, right now, I got up this morning, on Monday morning, I got up to go take my car to get it serviced, the car dealer. And I had to get up at 7 a.m. to get there at 8. And it was dark. It was barely any light out when I got out to go take my car. So imagine if daylight savings time stayed permanent. And let's say that, if I left in December, like if you're going out for Christmas, imagine if you're going out for Black Friday. Okay, you might remember there was a times where people go out for Black Friday and 5 in the morning, it would be dark and everybody would be waiting to go to the stores to go find some product that's out there. They only have 5 in stock and it's like the lowest price ever, but then there's all this other stuff to buy and people are going to try to race to go and get the one product that they want to go get, whatever, computer, TV, that's like at some ridiculous price, and that's it. Imagine if you had to go to Black Friday and it was still dark till about 9 a.m. Well, AM radio is being affected by this because of how they have to turn on their power, their radiated power, for a certain time period for daytime and then at night. So the U.S. Senate on Tuesday unanimously passed a bill that would make daylight savings time permanent beginning in 2023. If the House and President Biden go along, the proposal will mean that daytime-only AM stations would need to wait an hour later before signing on for several months of the year. So the morning time slots will be affected. They say the impact will be limited in summertime, but during the darkest days of November, December, January, and February, the sun will not rise until after 8 a.m., and in some cases nearly 9 a.m., when morning drive time is over. And it's not just daytime-only stations that would be impacted. Scores of AM stations are operated at either reduced power or directional signals after dark. The upside would be the change gives AMs more time during their afternoon drive, when some stations need to power down before 5 p.m. during winter months. AM owners said that the amount of money they would make from an extra hour broadcast time in the afternoon would not make up for the losses they'd lose in the morning. This is the Sunshine Protection Act. Radio stations and other businesses would have to wait until November 2023 to prepare for the outage. Arizona and Hawaii, who do not observe daylight saving time, and territories, including Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands, currently remain on standard time, would continue to do so. And there you go. So eventually daylight savings time would come in. The NEB has concerns about the bill, even as it recognizes there's a broad bipartisan and public support for the idea. And a spokesperson says NEB is working with the bill's authors, as well as leadership in the House Energy and Commerce Committee, to minimize potential impact on broadcasters. The FCC could come in and help, because they say now, for daylight savings time, AM stations were helped in 1959 with creating the so-called critical hours. The 2 hours immediately after sunrise and the 2 hours directly before sunset, when some AMs must operate at reduced power to compensate for the fact that signals can go much further because of how the Earth's atmosphere works. Then they created a system of pre-sunrise and post-sunset authorizations that permit daytime-only stations to remain on the air with up to 500 watts for a time longer than what they'd normally be allowed. So stations could sign on starting at 6 a.m., regardless of the actual local sunrise time on the calendar. And those were revised in 2007 to account for the longer daylight savings time approved by Congress. If that's permanent, there might be a new focus to a long-forgotten idea. FCC examined this in 2010 and had a proposal suggesting that pre-sunrise authorization, extending it by an hour to start at 5 a.m. to take into account changing commuter habits and the importance of morning drive radio to stations. And the proposal would help as many as 2,063 AM stations and the benefits of improved local coverage will outweigh any drawbacks, such as limiting the ability for listeners to hear distant stations in the early morning hour. But the FCC never went further with it and explored it as a way of other rule changes to revitalize the AM dial. And so, radio, they're so worried about their own bottom line and what they're able to make, but they're in such a bad spot. Overall, as I close this out tonight, radio is hurting from the fact they don't have music going on now that is consistently good. So if you want to have people listen to the radio on a regular basis, okay, if you're going to make them listen to the radio automated with voice tracking, and it's songs that have been out there for 6 months, a year, 2 years, and then in most cases they're playing golden recurrent songs that have been out for much longer, there's no new music out there. And their whole perceived new music idea that they have, there might be some new songs. Nope. Because they're not doing that. So all these major stations, they're playing songs that are older than old, and they don't care. And when you know that there are other places to stream new music, YouTube, Spotify, Pandora, Apple, they're not going to go to radio for new music. They're not going to go to radio for anything new music. They'd rather listen on streaming and get all the songs they want. That's what they're going to do. So keep that in mind. They're all struggling right now. They're not in a good spot. And this is another radio edition of the Broadcasters Podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. Got really much into the weeds, but this is one of those weeks where, nothing mainstream is really going on, but this is one of those days where it was just a very quiet week of broadcasting and media. And I decided, time for a radio rant. So here you go. You got it? Thanks for listening in to the Broadcasters Podcast, as you always do. Really appreciate all of you listening in. And for all of you radio files, I hope you really appreciate what I did here. I might have an interview coming up for the program. I actually did talk to somebody that I met. I'm going to shout him out here on the program tonight as I close out. Bruce Beck. He works with WNBC Television in New York, NBC4 New York. He's a lead sports reporter there. I got to meet him when I did an Uber ride from West Palm Beach Airport over to the New York Mets spring training facility, Clover Park in Port St. Lucie, Florida. And with that long ride, we had a lot we got to talk about, and it was great. And with that said, I need to catch back up with him, and hey, I'm going to ask him if he wants to go and come on and do the podcast. And he did verbally say, yeah, he would be interested. So I'm going to see if I can get him on, and that'll be an upcoming episode. We'll get that up there for everybody to go and check out. It'll be back to another interview, which would be kind of nice to do. Haven't done those in a while. I've been doing interviews for my When I'm Not podcasting series, though. So if you want to catch those, you can go ahead and look for When I'm Not Podcast. Just go to kingofpodcasts.com and look there under the KOP Radio Network, and you'll find the show. Or just look for When I'm Not Podcasting wherever you find podcasts, and you'll find it there. All right. And also look for this show wherever you find podcasts. Of course, on Spotify, which is where I listen to. Or on YouTube, youtube.com/JBRASCO951. That's it. Thanks for listening in. Until next week, remember that content is king, and the control of your content is in your hands.
Thank you for listening to the Broadcasters Podcast. Find all the links to subscribe to the show by going to broadcasterspodcast.com. And don't forget to check out the King of Podcasts wrestling program, the Wrestling is Real podcast, exclusively at wrestlingisreal.com.